My name is Maya Ellery. I am 30 years old, and on the day I was supposed to become someone's wife, I stood in a locked bridal suite with my wedding dress already on, my bouquet trembling in my hands, and 200 people downstairs waiting for a groom who had disappeared with his entire family. At first, everyone kept saying there had to be a reason. Maybe traffic was bad. Maybe his phone died. Maybe someone had gotten sick. But after the first hour passed, the excuses started sounding thinner. After the second hour, the smiles outside the door turned into whispers. And by the time my father stepped into the room with the kind of face no bride should ever see on her wedding day, I knew the truth before he said a single word. My groom was not late. He was not confused. He was not trapped in some emergency. He had chosen not to come. His parents had chosen not to come. His relatives, his friends, his entire side of the wedding had vanished like I was nothing more than a bad business risk they no longer wanted to invest in. My phone would not stop buzzing. Guests were asking if the ceremony was still happening. My sister was trying to keep people calm. The planner was crying in the hallway, and I remember staring at myself in the mirror, thinking this was how my life would be remembered, as the woman abandoned at her own wedding in front of everyone who mattered. Then the door opened again. It was not my groom. It was my boss. He walked in without panic, without pity, and without asking me to pretend I was fine. He came close enough that only I could hear him and whispered, "You are going to be okay. For today, let me be the groom." Before I tell you what happened after that, tell me what the weather is like where you are today. Is it calm, stormy, or somewhere in between? Because mine started like a disaster. But what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about love, betrayal, and the kind of revenge that does not need to be loud to be unforgettable. My father stepped into the bridal suite like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. His name was Walter Ellery, and I had never seen him look small before. He was the kind of man who could walk into a room full of contractors, bankers, and city inspectors and make everyone straighten their backs. He had built his custom furniture company from a rented garage, and he had spent my whole life teaching me that a person's name was only worth what they were willing to stand behind. But that afternoon, standing in the doorway with his phone still in his hand, he looked like someone had crushed that belief in front of him. My sister Iris stood behind him, pale and furious, holding 2 phones because she had been calling every number she could find. My mother Diane was in the hallway with the planner, trying to keep her voice from shaking. I did not ask the question right away, because I was terrified of the answer. My father closed the door and looked at me, not at the dress, not at the flowers, but at me. Then he said, "Maya, sweetheart, I need you to sit down." My knees almost gave out. I did not sit. I just held my bouquet tighter and said, "Tell me." He swallowed hard. "I just spoke to his mother. She called from a private number. She said the family will not be coming." For 1 second, the room made no sound at all. I heard myself say, "The family?" My father nodded. His parents, his cousins, the business partners on their side, most of his friends. They are gone or unreachable. The few who were already downstairs left through the side entrance about 20 minutes ago. Iris stepped forward and said, "They told the planner there had been a transportation problem, but that was a lie. One of the groomsmen texted me by mistake. Graham left last night." I turned to her. "Graham left last night?" Iris looked like she wanted to break something. He was not stuck in traffic. He was not sick. He left Chicago on a company jet after midnight. I had spoken to him the night before. He had told me he loved me. He had said he could not wait to see me at the end of the aisle. And while I had been trying to sleep with my engagement ring pressed to my chest, he had been boarding a jet and leaving me behind. I asked, "Where did he go?" Nobody answered fast enough. I asked again, louder this time, "Where is he?" My father looked at the floor. Then he said, his mother would not say clearly. But Ethan Rourke sent Iris a message. "He is in Aspen. With someone named Serena Voss." The name hit me because I knew it. Serena Voss was the lifestyle influencer hired to promote the Ashford family's newest wellness resort campaign. She had perfect hair, perfect skin, and a voice that made every compliment sound like an insult. I remembered the way she touched Graham's sleeve when she laughed. I remembered how he told me I was imagining things when I asked if something was going on. I remembered apologizing to him for being insecure. My father's voice lowered. His mother said Graham needs time to think. She said the family cannot attach itself to uncertainty. She said they will discuss reimbursement later. I laughed once, but it came out empty. Reimbursement. Not apology, not shame. 200 people were downstairs in a glass ballroom beside Lake Michigan, waiting under chandeliers and white orchids, and the family who had smiled in our engagement photos had decided I was a financial inconvenience. The wedding planner, Marlene Frost, knocked once and came in without waiting. Her mascara had smudged under one eye. "I have moved the ceremony time twice," she said carefully. "Guests are asking questions. The musicians need direction. The caterer wants to know whether dinner should be delayed. And people are already posting photos online asking why the groom's side is empty. Empty." That word went through me like cold water. I imagined every whisper turning into a post, every post turning into a rumor, every rumor reaching my clients, my coworkers, my future projects. Graham's family owned boutique hotels, private clubs, and luxury spas across the Midwest. My company designed spaces for some of the same people who invested in his family's resorts. By Monday morning, my humiliation would be a lunch story in every expensive restaurant downtown. I could already hear the cruel versions. She must have done something. He must have found out something. No man leaves a bride at the altar for no reason. I looked at my father and saw his hands shaking. He had carved the walnut arch himself. He had spent weekends finishing the reception tables because he said no daughter of his would walk into a rented room that did not have something made by love. And now, love had become a stage for public shame. My mother wrapped her arms around me, but I did not cry. Crying would make it real. And some stupid part of me still wanted to believe the door would open and Graham would rush in with some impossible explanation that fixed everything. But the door stayed closed. The only thing that opened was my phone, lighting up again and again with messages I could not answer. "Are you okay? Is the wedding still happening? Maya, what is going on?" I looked at the mirror. I saw a bride in a perfect dress with nowhere to go. Then I whispered, "He did not just leave me. He left me there for them to watch." No one knew what to do with silence like that. My mother kept rubbing my back as if I were a little girl with a fever. Iris paced in front of the windows, muttering words she would never say in front of our father. Marlene tried to speak professionally, but her voice kept cracking because even wedding planners have limits, and watching a bride get abandoned by an entire family was apparently one of them. My father asked if I wanted him to announce an emergency. He said we could tell everyone Graham had been taken ill. We could blame the delay on a private family matter. We could clear the ballroom quietly and let people eat before they left. Every option sounded like another way of placing a blanket over my humiliation so Graham could stay clean. I opened my mouth to answer, but someone knocked on the door again. Iris snapped, "Not now." The door opened anyway. The man who stepped in was not a relative, not a groomsman, not a photographer looking for drama. It was Nathaniel Cross, my boss, the founder and CEO of Crossline Design Group. The man who had hired me 5 years earlier when I was still fighting to be taken seriously in rooms full of older designers with better connections. I had seen Nathaniel calm angry investors, save failing hotel renovations, and negotiate with billionaires who thought money made them smarter than everyone else. I had never seen him step into a room like he was afraid of what he might find. He wore a black tuxedo because he had told me weeks before that he had a charity gala after my reception and might leave early. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then he looked at my father and said, "Walter, give me 2 minutes with her." My father stiffened. Iris crossed her arms. I should have felt embarrassed that my boss was seeing me like this, ruined and shaking in a dress that suddenly felt heavier than armor. But Nathaniel did not look at me like I was ruined. He looked at me like I was still standing. My father asked, "Why?" Nathaniel answered without taking his eyes off me. "Because every person downstairs is waiting to decide what this day means, and the only person who should decide that is Maya." That was the first sentence anyone had said all afternoon that made me feel like I had a choice. My family stepped back. Not out of trust exactly, but out of exhaustion. Nathaniel came closer slowly, stopping far enough away that I could breathe. He did not touch me. He simply said, "I know enough. I know he left. I know his family walked out. I know there are people downstairs pretending not to stare at the empty chairs. And I know you are about 3 minutes away from letting their cowardice write the ending of this day." I said, "What else am I supposed to do? Walk down there alone and thank everyone for coming to watch me get abandoned?" His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "You could. If that is what you want, I will stand beside you while you do it. You could cancel everything. If that is what you want, I will help your father get every guest out without letting anyone near you. Or you could walk down that aisle anyway." I stared at him. "There is no groom." Nathaniel took a breath. "Then let me stand there." The room shifted. Iris stopped pacing. My mother made a small sound. My father said, "Nathaniel." But Nathaniel kept speaking to me. "Not as your husband, unless someday you choose that with a clear mind and a clear heart. Not as a trick. Not as a lie on legal paper. The license has another man's name on it, so nothing signed today would be valid, and I would never ask you to do something dishonest. But as a symbolic ceremony, as a public vow that you were not left alone, yes, I can stand there. I can take the place he abandoned. I can make sure the last image those guests remember is not you being humiliated." My heartbeat was so loud I barely heard my father say, "This is insane." Nathaniel finally looked at him. "Maybe. But what they did was cruel, and cruelty counts on people being too shocked to respond. Walter, your daughter does not have to disappear because their son did." I whispered, "Why would you risk your reputation for me?" He looked back at me, and something moved behind his eyes. Something older than that afternoon. Something he had kept buried so carefully I had never seen it before. "Because he left you alone," he said. "And no one deserves to stand alone on the day they were promised love." I wanted to cry then. Not because I loved him. Not yet. But because for the first time since the nightmare began, someone was angry for me without trying to own my pain. Father Thomas Avery the officiant was called into the room. He confirmed what Nathaniel had said. The legal marriage license could not be used. A symbolic ceremony could be performed as a blessing, nothing binding unless we chose to make it legal later through the proper civil process. Marlene said she could adjust the program, dim the lights on the empty sections, move flowers, and have the ushers seat people tighter toward the center. Iris asked me 3 times if I was sure. My mother asked once. My father just came to me, took my hands and said, "Maya, you do not have to be brave for us." I looked at him, then at my dress, then at the door. I thought of Graham in Aspen with Serena Voss. I thought of his mother using the word reimbursement. I thought of every guest downstairs waiting for the bride to vanish quietly so the rich family could survive the scandal. Then I looked at Nathaniel. "If we do this," I said, "I am not doing it to pretend he did not hurt me." Nathaniel nodded. "Good. I am doing it because he does not get to turn me into a whisper." For the first time that day, my father smiled, not happily, proudly. Nathaniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a simple silver ring hanging from a thin chain. "It belonged to my father," he said quietly. "I have carried it since he died. If you want something for the ceremony, you can use it. Only if you want." I touched the ring with trembling fingers. It was warm from being close to his heart. That should have scared me. Instead, it steadied me. I looked at everyone in that room and said, "Then tell them the ceremony starts in 20 minutes. 20 minutes is not enough time to rebuild a wedding, but it is enough time to rebuild a woman's spine." Marlene moved like a general in heels, sending assistants downstairs with new instructions, rearranging the seating, ordering the musicians to restart the prelude, and telling the catering staff that dinner would proceed no matter what happened. Iris wiped my face, fixed my lipstick, and whispered that if Graham ever came within 10 feet of me again, she would need bail money. My mother laughed through her tears, which made me laugh too, and that tiny broken laugh felt like the first breath after being underwater. My father stood near the door with Nathaniel. They spoke quietly. both aware that what we were about to do would either save the day or make it even more unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. Nathaniel looked different now. Not because of the tuxedo or the ring, but because the careful distance he had always kept between us was gone. He was still respectful. He was still calm. But he was no longer just my employer standing at the edge of my life. He was the man who had stepped into the most humiliating moment I had ever known and asked what I wanted instead of telling me what I should endure. When it was time, my father offered me his arm. His hand was still shaking. I placed my hand over his and said, "Dad, I am okay." He looked at me and whispered, "Not yet, maybe. But you will be." The doors opened. I heard the music before I saw the room. It was not the joyful music we had chosen for the beginning of a perfect marriage, but a slower version played by the string quartet, as if even the instruments understood this was not a normal walk down the aisle. The guests rose. Hundreds of faces turned toward me. Some smiled with relief. Some looked confused. Some whispered, trying to understand why several rows on the groom's side were suddenly filled with flowers instead of people. I felt every stare like a hand pressing between my shoulders. For 3 steps, I almost stopped. Then I saw Nathaniel. He stood under the walnut arch my father had built, not pretending to be Graham, not trying to act like he belonged there, but standing with a quiet certainty that said I would not have to reach the end alone. I walked forward, and with every step the shame changed shape. It did not disappear. It became anger. Then it became focus. Then it became something close to power. Graham had planned to leave me as an empty seat, a broken bride, a story people would tell over wine. Instead, I was walking down the aisle toward a man who had chosen courage in the exact place where Graham had chosen cowardice. When my father placed my hand in Nathaniel's, he leaned close to him and said something I did not hear. Later, I learned my father had said, "Do not make me regret trusting you with what is left of this day." Nathaniel had answered, "I will protect her choice, not claim it." That was the difference between him and the man who had left me. Father Thomas began the ceremony with words that were not printed in the program. "Dear family and friends," he said, "today has not unfolded as expected. But love is not proven by perfect plans. It is proven by presence, by courage, and by the willingness to stand with someone when the easy thing would be to walk away." A murmur passed through the crowd. People knew then. Not everything, but enough. Enough to understand that something had gone terribly wrong, and that I was still there anyway. Nathaniel held my fingers like they were something he had been trusted with, not something he owned. When it was his turn to speak, he looked at me, not the audience. "Maya," he said, "I cannot undo the pain this day has brought you. I cannot erase the empty chairs or the silence before this moment. But I can promise this. As long as you allow me to stand beside you, you will not face this room, or any room after it, believing you were left because you were not enough. You are enough. You were enough before anyone chose you, and you will be enough after anyone leaves." I felt the tears then, but I did not feel weak. I felt seen. When Father Thomas turned to me, I realized everyone was waiting. I had not prepared vows for Nathaniel. I had prepared vows for a man who was probably drinking champagne beside a fireplace in Aspen while his mother calculated legal exposure. So I told the truth. I came here today believing love meant keeping a promise no matter who was watching. I learned that some people love their image more than their word. But I also learned that dignity can survive betrayal when someone reminds you that your life is not over just because someone else was too selfish to stay. I do not know what tomorrow looks like, but today, I choose to stand. The room was completely still. Then my father began to cry. Nathaniel took the silver ring from Father Thomas and paused before touching my hand. "Is this okay?" he whispered, too softly for anyone else to hear. I nodded. He slipped the ring onto my finger. It was too large, so I curled my hand slightly to keep it from falling. The imperfection made it feel more real. I gave him the plain band that had been meant for Graham. Nathaniel accepted it without flinching. Father Thomas did not say husband and wife. He said, "Let this moment be remembered not for the betrayal that tried to define it, but for the courage that answered it." Then he smiled gently and said, "You may seal this vow if both of you choose." Nathaniel leaned in slowly and stopped before our lips touched. Again, he whispered, "Your choice." I whispered yes. He kissed me. It was supposed to be symbolic. It was not. The room erupted in applause. People stood. My mother sobbed. Iris clapped like she was trying to start a riot. My father held himself upright with both hands on the back of a chair. Nathaniel and I turned to face the guests, and I saw something I had not expected. Not pity. Respect. The reception that followed should have felt fake, but it did not. It felt strange, tender, fragile, and alive. People congratulated me with careful eyes. Some hugged me longer than necessary. Others squeezed my hand in a way that told me they understood more than they would ever say out loud. The first dance began because Marlene refused to let disaster win. Nathaniel offered his hand. "Only if you want to," he said. I looked at the room, at the guests, at the cameras, at the flowers covering the empty seats. Then I looked at him. "I want to finish what I started." He led me to the floor. We danced slowly, not like lovers yet, not like strangers either. Halfway through the song he said, "Breathe, Maya. You made it through the worst part." I looked up at him and said, "Did I?" His expression darkened just enough for me to know he understood. "No," he said. "But now you will not face the rest of it alone." By the time dinner was served, the story had already started changing. People did not know exactly what had happened, but they knew enough. Graham Ashford and his family had vanished, and Nathaniel Cross had stepped into the fire without asking for applause. My father lifted his glass and said, "I have spent my life building things out of wood because wood tells the truth. If it is weak, it splits. If it is strong, it holds." Today I learned people are the same. Some split under pressure, some hold. Then he looked at me, and then at Nathaniel. "To the people who hold." The room stood for that toast. I saw Graham's business contacts avoid looking at one another. I saw women from his mother's circle whisper into their phones. It did not bring me joy yet. I was still too raw for joy, but it felt like justice beginning to breathe. Graham had thought disappearing would leave me exposed. Instead, his absence was becoming evidence. Nathaniel stayed beside me through dinner, but never acted like he owned the moment. He did not touch my waist unless I reached for him first. He did not interrupt when people spoke to me. Near the end of the reception, he asked if I wanted air. I nodded, and he guided me onto the terrace overlooking the lake. The night was cold, so he placed his jacket around my shoulders. I almost laughed. "You know this is how rumors start." He looked back at the ballroom and said, "Maya, I believe the rumors started several hours ago." That made me laugh for real. Then silence settled between us. I watched the lights moving on the water and said, "You saved me in there." Nathaniel shook his head. "No. I gave you an option. You saved yourself by taking it." I turned toward him. "Why did you do it? And please do not say, because nobody deserves to stand alone." That was beautiful, but it was not the whole answer. For the first time all day, he looked away. 5 years ago, you walked into my conference room with a portfolio that was too good for the position you wanted. One of my senior designers challenged your hotel lobby concept, and you corrected him so politely that it took him 10 seconds to realize he had lost. I hired you before you reached the elevator. I said, "You hired me because I was good." "Yes," he said, "and because I knew you would become better than almost everyone in that building if people got out of your way." He looked at me then. "I admired you first. Respect is safe. Love is more inconvenient." My throat tightened. "Nathaniel." He raised one hand gently. "I never planned to tell you. You were engaged. I was your boss. There were lines I would not cross. When you brought Graham to the company holiday dinner, I shook his hand and spent the rest of the night trying to convince myself he looked at you the way a man should look at the woman he gets to marry." I went very still, and he said quickly, "I am not telling you this to ask for anything. After tonight, I will remove myself from your reporting line. If you stay at Crossline, you will work under Priya or Marcus. If you leave, I will give you the strongest recommendation I have ever written. Your career will not depend on what you feel for me. Not now. Not ever. That sentence broke something open in me. Graham had always made love feel like negotiation. Nathaniel was offering me the one thing I had been starving for: freedom. I looked back at him. When you kissed me during the ceremony, was that part of the rescue? No. Was it pity? Never. Was it real? More real than anything I have done in years. I stepped closer. I knew I was hurt. I knew I was vulnerable. But sometimes the heart recognizes safety before the mind builds a wall. I touched his cheek. He stayed completely still, giving me every chance to stop. I did not stop. I kissed him. This kiss was not for the guests. There was no applause. It was quiet, trembling, and mine. When I pulled back, Nathaniel rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "We go as slowly as you need." For the first time all day, the future did not look like an empty hallway. It looked like a door I might one day choose to open. Graham Ashford came back 17 days later with a tan, a cashmere coat, and the confidence of a man who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. It was a cold, rainy Thursday in Chicago. I had just returned from the civil clerk's office, where I had signed the legal papers that made my marriage to Nathaniel real. Not because the symbolic ceremony forced me into it. Not because I needed revenge. I signed because after 2 weeks of honest conversations, patience, and space, I chose him with a clear mind. He had already removed himself from my reporting structure at Crossline. Every time I expected pressure, he gave me a choice. Then someone knocked on my apartment door. I opened it and found Graham standing there with white roses in one hand. "Maya," he said softly, like my name still belonged to him. I looked at the roses, then at him. "You have 30 seconds to explain why you are at my door." He blinked. "I know you are angry." "No," I said. "Angry was last week. This is something else." He asked to come in. I said absolutely not. He sighed like I was being difficult. "Maya, please. I made a mistake. I was overwhelmed. My mother was in my ear. The resort expansion, the investors, the prenup pressure, all of it got into my head. Serena was just someone who listened." I laughed before I could stop myself. "She listened so well you flew to Aspen with her the night before our wedding?" His face flushed. "It was not like that." "Then what was it like?" He glanced down the hall, worried a neighbor might hear. That small movement told me everything. Even now, his real fear was not what he had done to me. It was who might find out. I stepped into the hallway and closed my door behind me. "Let me save you some time. You did not lose me when you got on that jet. You lost me when you let your mother call my father because you were too much of a coward to call me yourself." His expression hardened. "I heard what happened after. I heard you let Cross stand in for me. I heard you made a spectacle of it." Something cold moved through me. "I made a spectacle? You could have canceled quietly. Instead, you embarrassed my family. Your family embarrassed itself. You married your boss in front of everyone to punish me." I smiled, not kindly. First, the ceremony was symbolic. Nothing illegal happened. Second, Nathaniel did not marry me that day. He stood beside me because you ran away. Third, if you came here hoping to find the woman you left crying in a bridal suite, she is not available anymore. Graham stared at me. "What does that mean?" I lifted my left hand. The silver ring from Nathaniel's father had been resized. Beneath it sat a simple wedding band from the courthouse ceremony. Graham's face changed completely. "No. Yes. I am legally married to Nathaniel Cross. As of this afternoon." He looked like I had slapped him. "You expect people to believe nothing was going on?" I stepped closer. "Be careful, Graham. You do not want to make accusations when I have enough evidence to bury the version your family is selling." His eyes flickered. "What evidence?" I showed him screenshots, Ethan's message saying Graham had left the night before, a photo of Graham and Serena boarding the Ashford Company jet, a voicemail from Margaret Ashford discussing brand exposure instead of my pain, an email chain about spinning the abandoned wedding as my emotional breakdown if the press asked questions. Graham went pale. "You have no idea what you are doing. My family can ruin you. Your little design career depends on people like us." I looked at him for a long moment. There was the man I had almost married. The real one. The one who thought love was a ladder and anyone below him could be stepped on. I opened my apartment door. "Leave." He dropped the roses at my feet. "You will regret choosing him." I looked down at the flowers, then back at him. "Graham, choosing him was not the revenge. Not choosing you was." I closed the door. 3 days later, Margaret Ashford gave a statement to a luxury hospitality blog claiming her son stepped away from the wedding because of concerns about my emotional instability and inappropriate closeness with Nathaniel. It was elegant, cruel, and false. My lawyer, Rebecca Sloan, released the timeline, the abandoned wedding details, the company jet records, the messages, and Margaret's voicemail. Nathaniel's legal team confirmed he had removed himself from my reporting chain before our legal marriage, and Father Thomas confirmed the wedding day ceremony had been symbolic. Then Serena Voss went online. Graham had promised her he was ending things with me before the wedding, then tried to crawl back to her after I refused him. Serena posted messages, Aspen photos, and a voice note where Graham laughed about needing one dramatic weekend before returning to clean up the bride situation. The bride situation. That phrase went viral by morning. People repeated it under every Ashford brand post. Brides threw away Ashford spa gift cards on video. Former employees shared stories about unpaid overtime and toxic management. Investors started asking why a company jet had been used for Graham's personal escape. The board froze the $40 million wellness resort expansion. A major lender pulled back. 2 private club partners suspended their contracts. Within 6 weeks, Graham was removed from his executive development role. Margaret stepped down from the board. After the voicemail became a public relations nightmare, the Ashford family sold 3 spa locations to cover debt from the collapsed expansion. The last thing I heard was that Graham had been sent to manage a struggling wellness lodge in Idaho, far from cameras, investors, and women he thought would wait forever. He sent one final email months later. No apology. Just one sentence. "I hope you are happy with what you did." I deleted it without replying. I did not ruin Graham Ashford. I stopped protecting him from the consequences of being himself. Happiness did not arrive like fireworks. It arrived quietly, in small habits I did not know I needed. Nathaniel learned how I took my coffee, then pretended not to notice when I changed it every other week. He left space beside the window because I liked to sketch in morning light. He never used my pain as proof that I owed him love. On the nights when the memory of the bridal suite came back too sharply, he did not tell me to move on. He sat beside me and reminded me that healing was not a performance. For a while I stayed at Crossline Design Group under a different partner, just as Nathaniel had promised, but 6 months later, I wanted something of my own. I opened a small interior design studio focused on warm, sustainable homes for ordinary families, single mothers, aging parents, and young couples buying their first apartments. People who wanted beauty but had been told beauty was only for the rich. My father built my first studio desk from reclaimed walnut. Iris hung the sign crooked on purpose because she said perfection had caused me enough trouble. My mother brought soup on opening day and cried when the first client walked in. Nathaniel invested nothing at first because I asked him not to. I wanted to know I could stand on my own feet. He respected that. Later, when the studio grew, he became my loudest supporter, not my rescuer. That mattered. Love, I learned, is not someone taking the wheel every time the road gets difficult. Love is someone sitting beside you, trusting you to drive, and staying awake in case the night gets dark. 1 year after the wedding that was not supposed to happen, Nathaniel and I held a small vow renewal at a lake house in Wisconsin. No reporters, no investors, no empty chairs covered with flowers. Just family, close friends, a simple dinner, and a wooden arch my father built with the words, "Choose what chooses you," carved on the inside where only we could see it. Father Thomas came too, smiling like he had known all along that the symbolic vow would become something real. Iris gave a speech that made everyone laugh and cry. She said, The right person is not always the one who arrives first. Sometimes the right person is the one who stays, when arriving would be easier than staying. 2 years later, on a snowy January morning, I found out I was pregnant. I told Nathaniel by placing a tiny pair of yellow socks inside one of his drafting tubes. He stared at them for almost a full minute before understanding. Then he sat down on the kitchen floor and cried so hard our dog barked at him. The dog was a golden retriever named Maple, adopted from a shelter after being surrendered twice. Nathaniel said we should choose a younger dog. I said I knew what it felt like to be left by people who had promised to keep you. Maple came home with us that afternoon and immediately claimed Nathaniel's side of the bed. He never complained. As for Graham, I did not follow his life closely. I did not need daily proof that he had fallen. The last I heard, the Ashford name no longer opened every door it used to. Their company survived, but smaller, quieter, humbled by the scandal they had tried to pin on me. Margaret never apologized. I stopped waiting for one. That was another lesson. Closure does not always come from the person who hurt you. Sometimes closure is the day you realize their apology would not change your future anyway. Looking back, I understand something I could not understand in that bridal suite. Being abandoned was not the end of my story. It was the exposure of a lie I had mistaken for love. Graham leaving me at the altar felt like public destruction, but in truth, it was a brutal kind of protection. He removed himself before I built a life around his selfishness. He showed me exactly who he was, and because he did it so publicly, I never had to doubt myself again. The lesson I carry now is not that every heartbreak leads to a better man or a perfect ending. Life is not that simple. The lesson is that dignity is a decision we can make even when our hands are shaking. Self-respect is valuable knowledge, and sometimes the hardest education comes from the people who disappoint us most. Do not let betrayal teach you that you are unlovable. Let it teach you to stop shrinking for people who only value you when you are useful. Let it teach you to choose truth over image, peace over approval, and courage over the fear of starting again. I was abandoned by my groom and his family at my own wedding. But I was not abandoned by life. I lost a man who saw me as a risk, and I found a man who saw me as a person. Sometimes the door that closes in your face is not rejection. Sometimes it is protection. And sometimes the person who leaves you in front of everyone only makes room for the person brave enough to stand beside you when everyone is watching.
Thank you for supporting our channel and staying until the end. This story is fictional and intended only for entertainment, educational, and reflective storytelling purposes. We hope it reminds you that success after betrayal can feel satisfying, but the deeper victory is becoming peaceful enough that the people who hurt you no longer have power over your emotions.